Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Simon Says Stamp, and welcome to the May edition of Making the Cut, my series here on the Simon Says Stamp YouTube channel. Today we are going to take a snow globe and turn it into like this terrarium or cloche for some beautiful greenery and mushrooms. I am a huge fan of snow globes, as most of you probably know if you follow me. I love them for obviously the holiday season and winter and all of that. But I thought it would be really fun to see if I could take a snow globe and turn it into something that could be used year-round. I'm going to start with this snow globe shaped background piece. This is the Honeybee Stamps snow globe, and I am taking Speckled Egg and Stormy Sky Distress Oxide inks, and I press them in to my Simon Says Stamp glass mat, and I am using a piece of transparency to ink smoosh the background. All of my pieces today are going to be colored with this technique, something that's going to give us a little bit more of a messy watercolor type look, but I call it controlled messy. Where splatter, you can't control it quite as much, or ink blending gives you a very smooth look. I want this to have a very messy look. There I'm adding a little bit more Stormy Sky over the top of that Speckled Egg, filling in all of the pieces. This is going to be the background of our cloche. So kind of the globe portion. I wanted it to look, you know, kind of almost clear-ish, but have that blue look to it. So let's clean off our glass mat, and I'm going to set this aside to completely dry. Then I'm going to go ahead and go back with the Stormy Sky, and these are the texture strips from Hero Arts, and I love them for adding little bits and pieces of distress. And I am going to use an acrylic block, and I am just going to stamp these like off the edge or, you know, kind of randomly over the background in several places. Building an interesting background is always one of my favorite ways to really set off a die cut scene. I think we'll add just a little bit more, maybe down here along the bottom. It will peek out from where all the greenery is. Next, I am going to die cut the rest of the pieces for my card, and that's going to include the tattered leaves, the etched delicate frond, and the mushroom stems. We're going to take peeled paint, crushed olive, and forest moss, and I'm adding a little water from a mini mister. You can add water however you like, but I'm just kind of making a palette here on my glass mat. And we're going to start with the frond, and you can see I'm using my transparency, and I just clean it off, and I'm going to start adding color all over. And I did try to just pick up mostly one color at a time. You'll notice they start mixing after a while, but this is going to give us a really fun look where there's multiple colors on the image. I am using Nina 110-pound weight cardstock, and even at that, sometimes the delicate die cuts are going to get kind of flimsy. If you want a little bit more sturdier paper, you could always opt for a watercolor cardstock instead. But I find that this works really well. You just want to make sure everything completely dries. Now, before I move on, I did decide to take some of like the crushed olive mostly, maybe a little forest moss too, and I am adding that color to the underside piece of those mushroom stems as well as the stems themselves. And I really want it to be kind of messy. I am going to go back with some browns and even golds over these here in just a little bit. This is a really fun way to just add, like I said, that watercolor look, but it's a controlled watercolor. I'm not super confident with a paintbrush and watercolor, and for me, this is a great way to achieve a similar look. Next, I've got some bundled. I'm going to tell you the wrong color. I can tell already. Rustic Wilderness, and let me look for the other color because Bundled sage, yes, bundled sage and rustic wilderness. And for my tattered leaves, I am going to add these more green instead of that goldy yellow type color that we did for the frond. I want some variety in my greenery. And then I even just kind of dumped over my leaf and put it into the ink left on my glass mat. Now this one does get very wet because I did that, and it's going to be super delicate. You can speed up the drying process with a heat tool. I generally don't, and I did not for these. I just let them all air dry. And they do dry pretty quickly while you're working on the other parts of the project. You can see how delicate it is. It's really kind of flimsy. But once it's dry, it will be perfectly fine. Next, we're going to take some ground espresso and gathered twigs, and I'm going to add a little more water to these, and we're going to start adding color to our mushroom stems. And also the underside of the mushrooms. I love with the mushrooms that there are 3 pieces. So there is like the underside, which is the layering piece, the stem, and then the top piece. That's going to be the final piece we color pretty much here. I have those off to the side because I really don't want any brown on those at the moment. And a little white showing through your die cuts works great. This is something that is not easily achieved with ink blending or kind of other methods of coloring, but ink smooshing works really, really well if you kind of want that variety, if you want little bits and pieces of the white to show through. I even took a little leftover brown from my transparency, picked up a little more, and I added some brown to my tattered leaves. I think I got a little too aggressive, so I will go back with some more green and a little bit to cover a little bit of that up that I wasn't super happy with. It's really just a trial and error, and it's a very fun, very relaxing way of coloring. I had a lot of fun just kind of playing with my inks and my die cuts, trying to get the right effect. Okay, for our large mushroom cap, I have got a little lumberjack plaid and aged mahogany. So definitely more a bright red and then a little bit more of a dirty dark red. Let's start with our light and then we'll go in with the dark. For me, with this particular technique, it is all about layering. It's all about layering and adding lots and lots of different layers of color. And I find it works best, let it dry a little bit. You're going to notice here when all of my die cuts are dry, we are going to add a final layer, which I am calling my magic layer. Oh, I love it. That looks so good. You could even go back after this is dry with maybe a little more aged mahogany if you want some darker splatters over the top of that. I'm going to move some of these out of the way. And I'm not going to clean up my reds yet. I might want to use some more of those. I've got some fossilized amber and wild honey now. Let's just add a little more water to those. And we're going to do our medium-sized mushroom cap. And this is almost, to me, a little too perfect, too yellow. So I picked up a few little splatters of aged mahogany. And I'm just going to add that to this, and that instantly transforms this mushroom cap. I love it. And the great thing about this as well, it's going to look different every single time because you're never going to lay that transparency down just like you did before. I'm even going to go in, the red is kind of dried a bit. I'm going to take a little wild honey and add some yellow splatters over that red. Look how amazing that looks. You can see it over the red of that mushroom. I'm going to add a little more water here just for a little bit more washed out look, for a little better coverage of that mushroom cap. We're just going to do a tiny little clean, and I'm going to add wild honey and aged mahogany to that last mushroom cap. So basically very similar colors to all of these, but I want them to all be slightly different. I hope that makes sense. Let's go ahead and clean up our work surface. Just gonna do a quick wipe. I'll do a much better clean when I'm all finished. Oh, that's gonna be cute. And now the magic. I have got my very favorite Distress Mica Stain, Harvest Moon. This is my go-to favorite. And yes, you can splatter it. You can use a paintbrush to splatter, but I thought, wouldn't it be fun to see if we can pick up the color with the transparency for a very similar effect to the rest of the ink smooshing, but we're going to ink smoosh with the mica stain. So I sprayed a little bit on my glass mat, and you can see I'm picking it up, but I'm tapping it off because I want it to be very minimal. We're not covering the die cuts with the mica stain. I want little splatters of that shimmery goodness over our mushrooms. So we're just going to pick up little bits of it and add it to every single die cut. And when it's reflected in the light, when it's all dry, it's going to have these little shimmery splatters everywhere. And to me, this is the magic of this particular card. Lots and lots of layering, but it's just a really, really fun technique and look. I think it would be amazing in any of the Distress Mica Stains, and I would love if you try this, if you let us know, because I think it would be super, super pretty. Okay, once I'm done with that, I am just going to kind of clean everything up here. And this is where I decided that my tattered leaves a little too brown. I'm going to grab a little more Rustic Wilderness, and we're just going to go back in with that darker green color and try to add a little more of that in. It's not going to necessarily cover up the brown, but maybe mute it just a little bit. And I think that looks good. Now, once everything is completely dry, I have die cut multiple frames from that snow globe. I have 6 of them here, I believe, 5 or 6. And then I've got a solid frame out of acetate, that same background panel from the snow globe as before. We're going to take a sentiment from the Sympathy Greetings Mix stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, but any greeting is going to work here. I made a sympathy card, but truly you could do anything. Now, before I assemble the snow globe, I wanted to stamp my sentiment. I do want to tell you that you're going to notice that's not where the sentiment ends up on the card. And the reason I left this in the video is I wanted to share how you can fix a mistake. So when I was looking at the unassembled card, I thought this was where I wanted the sentiment, not realizing that it is going to be in a spot that makes it hard to read. And at this point I saw it, but I guess I just didn't realize that it wasn't going to be quite as visible as I wanted. Stamping on the acetate layer is one of my very favorite things. So I'm letting it sit there for a minute while I add some color to the base of my snow globe or cloche. I've die cut this from some Simon Says Stamp Craft cardstock, and I'm adding gathered twigs and ground espresso Distress Oxide inks to the edge of this just to kind of add some great shading. And I am going to glue my acetate to the back of my top frame. So at this point I have left my greeting exactly where it is, and we're going to start assembling the card. Now, this was quite a lot of work, and the reason I've left this in the video is I love about acetate that it kind of is erasable, if you will, which you're going to see here in a minute. So I have glued the frame to the acetate, and then we will glue the base of our cloche down along the bottom. And I'm going to put some acrylic blocks on top to hold this down and hold it flat while it dries and while I assemble the rest of the card. So I've got my background, and it looks like I've got 4 more layers of the frame. You can do as many or as few as you want. I like building it up a little bit when I'm doing an acetate layer. It allows you to not have that lumpy bumpy look, And if you wanted to make this a shaker, you definitely could. With the extra die cut frames, it makes it very easy and clean, and you're not having to, shape your foam around that curved edge. I immediately want to tuck my greenery into the cloche, kind of underneath that first layer, as well as my mushroom cap. And for me, I really, really want everything to be very layered. So there's going to be some mushrooms tucked back behind the greenery, some in front. I'm going to tilt my mushroom cap a little bit. And we will use those same acrylic blocks to kind of help hold everything down and nice and flat, especially since we're layering so many die cut pieces. It's looking very pretty though. I love it. I love the little peeking text in the background. Let's go ahead and add that little mushroom there. This one's going to be kind of back behind with a leaf in front. This is our medium. And then we're going to do our little one over here to the left. And it's going to be more in the front. The other two have some leaves covering up at least part of it. And I decided to do this little guy kind of more in the front. You could even add more if you wanted to. I love these. And then we're going to take our remaining 3 frames and stack them one on top of another. Now at this point, once you have your frames all in place, that is when you could add a shaker material if you want to. I don't always find that I need to have a shaker material. I was looking more for a way to incorporate that glass look. That's what the acetate is providing with the text on the, let's say, quote unquote glass, almost like etched glass. That's kind of the effect I'm going for here. And that looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the back of my frame with the acetate. And this layer will be popped right on top. Now, right away, I see my mistake. And I thought, well, it'll be okay. And the more I sat and looked at it, the more I don't like how the text is completely covering up the top of the mushroom. It really should be moved down quite a bit, almost underneath the top of that mushroom cap. So when I realized this, I am going to take a very clean cloth. You can also use a paper towel and a little bit of the Simon Says stamp cleaner, and we are going to erase that StazOn ink. StazOn is a solvent ink, and we are able to remove it. It's permanent when you have it where you want it, but you can remove it with some stamp cleaner, and you don't even have to use the StazOn I found. You can use regular Simon Says stamp cleaner. Then you want to make sure it's very good and dry. And then I put it back in my MISTI and I stamped it again. And I even missed a little bit. It's not going to be quite as easy to stamp because we're stamping and it's going to be over those layers, but I was able to fix it this way. So don't give up, and it looks so much better. I love that you can see the top of the mushroom cap. My point of showing you this was I don't want you to get mad and throw away something, especially if you've used liquid glue and it's not easy to pull apart. Where you've used StazOn on acetate, you can remove it and stamp something new, or even stamp and die cut a greeting to place on top if you don't want to restamp it. I'm using some May Arts twine now. I've wrapped around the base of my cloche, and I'm going to just tie in a little bow. I like that little rustic touch to this. So pretty. And now comes the finishing detail part. I want to place this on an A2 card base. Now you could place it right on an A2 card base if you wanted to, but I wanted to make a shaped card. So we're going to go back with our main background piece for the snow globe, and we're going to take a folded A2 card, This is a card from card base from Simon Says Stamp. They're my favorite. And using some repositionable tape, I'm going to place my snow globe where it hangs off the top fold of the card just a little bit. We want to keep the fold of the card, but we're going to die cut the rest of the card shape. And then I'm going to roll this through my die cutting machine. You may have to do it a couple times. It is pretty thick cardstock. And then we're going to peel away all of that die cut portion of this, and we're going to be left with a shaped cloche snow globe shaped card, which I think maintains the feel of the design perfectly without all of that extra space around the top. So we're going to line this up then. It will slightly hang off the top of the card. There's going to be just like a little 1/8 of an inch or so there up at the top of the card, where our little cloche is a little taller than the top fold, pardon me, but that is totally fine. I'm going to glue that in place. I'm just going to put some acrylic blocks on top to hold that flat, and then let's embellish our card. To me, this is always the finishing touch that brings it all together. I knew when I stamped Sending Thoughts and Prayers Your Way that I wanted to add a smaller sentiment strip underneath that is stamped and die cut on a separate piece of paper and popped up with foam adhesive. Taking one of the leftover white cardstock pieces from some of the frames I used for my card, I'm going to stamp I'm So Sorry from that same Sympathy Greetings Mix stamp set using the Woodsy Positively Saturated ink from Simon Says Stamp, and then we'll die cut this with a sentiment label die. I'm just going to put my stamp back on my sheet here. Oh, and I totally forgot. I actually decided to stamp inside of my card as well to finish it off. I grabbed another greeting from that set. Our loved ones are forever close to us in our memories, and I'm going to stamp that with the Woodsy ink inside. Just a beautiful finishing to this sympathy card. Oh, isn't that so pretty? Imagine adding, if you are more of a florals person, you could do this with florals, succulents, if you have succulent dies. I just think there's so many possibilities here beyond the holidays. So I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. I've got some foam adhesive on, or I'm going to put some foam adhesive on the back, and we're going to pop that up right underneath our stamped greeting above, or the glass etching I call it. And it's really starting to all come together now. We're going to finish with a scattering of some coffee bean hearts. I always like adding a little heart, but to me, this card didn't call for a bright red heart. I wanted something a little bit more in the neutral family that would complement the design. So we're going to go with these Trinity Stamps coffee bean hearts. And I'm going to do a little one underneath the greetings and then a trio up at the top where I did feel that it needed a little something. And then to finish off the base of our cloche, I want to add like some little nail trim. And I thought I had enough of these gold pearls. I'm just going to put a little dab of glue in all 4 corners. But I actually think I only had 2. So you're going to see me switch that out for some gold satin Trinity Stamps pearls instead of these. Anything you have is going to really work here. It just kind of depends on the look you're going for, but I just, before that glue dried, I did pop off that little pearl and replace it. I wanted to make sure and let you know that. The triangle trays from Simon Says Stamp are going to be your best helper when doing a card like this. It's so easy to dump out all your little parts and pieces, whether it's sequins or pearls or any of those kind of things, and to see what you have and to easily pick them up with your placement tool and put them right where you want them. I kind of like these satin ones better, so I think it worked out for the best. And my card is all finished. Thank you guys so much for joining me for the May edition of Making the Cut here on Simon Says Stamp. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube for your convenience. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at SimonSaysStamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.